It's fantastic to learn from people from around the world. I got to travel to Ukraine and India and learn about what diabetes is like in those countries, but I got to learn about what diabetes is like in like 60 other countries, which is so difficult to do by yourself. So I highly encourage you to apply to the program where you can meet incredible people making huge impacts from all around the world. And also, it's just super fun to hang out with other people with diabetes. You can talk about, oh my gosh, my blood sugar is this number, and they'll understand. We can talk about, oh, life with diabetes, and they'll get you. The social part was so much fun. And also just the sessions, I really appreciated those. We got to learn from experts in diabetes from around the world and really be prepared for our advocacy project. So we had so many sessions on how to write effective email, how to navigate these diabetes databases from around the world, about the World Health Organization.
Welcome to Global Diabetes Insights, your go-to podcast for navigating the world of diabetes. I am Tino, a certified diabetes educator and a global advocate for non-communicable diseases.
And I'm Kona, a global advocate and a medical doctor. Together, we're your hosts, dedicated to raising awareness, fostering open discussions, and creating a safe space for everyone affected by diabetes.
Join us as we dive into empowering conversations with individuals living with diabetes, caregivers, healthcare professionals, and researchers. Our goal is to not only guide you through effective diabetes management, but also to inspire advocacy for proper healthcare access.
So get ready for a journey of insights, ideas, and diverse perspectives. Let's amplify our collective voice and create positive change. Get involved, get engaged, and join us in creating the change we need. So welcome everybody to Global Diabetes Insights. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Global Diabetes Insights. I'm Kona. Together with us we have Jamie. I met Jamie some months ago in Thailand in YLD training in Bangkok by IDF. We will talk about that a bit later. So hello Jamie, thank you for being here. As a first question, I would like you to introduce yourself to us.
Thank you so much for inviting me to be on this podcast. I really appreciate it and excited for this opportunity. So, hi, my name is Jamie Kurtzig. I am from the United States, California, and I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was 1 year old. So I really don't know what life is like without diabetes. I am super passionate about the space because it's been so difficult living with diabetes, and also it's been difficult for me to see such disparities in care. I feel like I've been very privileged to be able to use insulin pumps, continuous glucose monitors, and closed loop systems, but not everyone has access to them. So a little bit more context on me. I am a student right now studying bioengineering at Stanford, and I will start my master's degree in clinical research and epidemiology in the fall. I'm very excited about that. I have interned at several places, including Dexcom, and I just started the Young Leaders in Diabetes program at IDF, where I'm representing the United States, and I absolutely loved that. I'll get to talk about it a little bit later, I think, though.
Yeah, thank you. You have such a broad background, and it's pretty interesting to hear from you that the whole life you've been living with diabetes, so you don't quite remember how it is like to not live as a person with diabetes. Has that influenced your thoughts or your life, this space to comparison?
Absolutely. So I have friends that have been diagnosed much later in their tween years, and I think it's honestly a lot harder for them. I think that as the diagnosis age increases, it's easier for the parents and harder for the person being diagnosed. When I was diagnosed, obviously I couldn't do anything. So my parents had to wake up in the middle of the night every 2 hours, check my blood sugar, feed me, and give me insulin. So that was very difficult for them. Also, just very difficult for them to process that I was going to have diabetes for my entire life. Versus when you're diagnosed later, in my understanding, it's more of a change for the person, and it's a lot more difficult for them to accept because they've lived some of their life without diabetes and not having to do these extra steps. Whereas for me, like those extra steps were always just built in, they were always just normal. But for these kids being diagnosed, they have to learn all of this new stuff, whereas I kind of had more of a gradual transfer of the learning and the doing. And I also think that when you're older, you need to do more of the responsibilities by yourself just at that age. So they are having to do lots of learning, or else they will suffer awful consequences for their health. I just had a really slow, nice learning curve. I learned a little bit more every year versus people diagnosed in their teen years. They have to do a lot of catching up and just everything is thrown at them all at once.
Yeah, I understand that by living with diabetes since 1 year old, diabetes is your normal. So you just adapt every year to the different technologies or the improvements that are being made. And I was impressed also when we met face to face by your background, considering your young age. How do you implement your background, your educational, but also your experience in the field of diabetes? How are you aiming to use that knowledge in diabetes?
That's a great question. So I have two different main paths right now. The first one is being a medical device engineer. I'm very interested in medical devices, CGMs, insulin pumps, closed loop systems. They absolutely fascinate me. So that's one area that I think would be really fun to work in. The other area is medical device clinical research. So, in order for these new devices to get approved by the FDA, that Food and Drug Administration in the United States, so in order for them to be approved by the regulatory body, we need lots of clinical trials to show that they are safe and helpful for people. And so, I am considering getting my master's in clinical research so that I could, in the future, help with these clinical trials and get these technologies out to people. Two different stages of the process, but I am just really passionate about medical devices and would love to have as much expertise in both of them as possible, since I think those are two of the most critical areas. Medical device engineering, I can hopefully use my experience as a patient and member of the diabetes community to advocate for technology features that are important to me in the community. And in clinical research, I can also have that personal connection with the patients enrolled in the studies and get to know them and help them manage their condition, accept that diabetes isn't a death sentence. You can live a very happy, great life even with diabetes.
That was a very impressive answer. It's interesting because most people with diabetes go to the advocacy part, to the medical part of it, and going to the technical part of it, it's quite difficult for me. It requires a lot of studying and knowledge to decode how all the things that we wear actually work. But what is even more interesting is that you live in a place where accessibility faces many challenges. We know that insulin for all movement started in order to address the US and how insulin is not affordable or accessible in every patient with diabetes in the US. I would like to ask you, how do you experience these accessibility issues in your country, but also what does accessibility mean to you?
That's a fantastic question, and I'm very excited to talk about that. So, when I was growing up, I live in the Bay Area in California, which is right next to where like Google, Apple, all of these great companies were invented. So, it's really a technology hub. And so, I was always thinking like, oh, how do we improve these technologies, which I'm still thinking about obviously as an engineer, but I was really not considering that so many people don't have access to technologies. I was just thinking, how can we improve the technological aspects, not the human aspects. So when I was in high school in 2019, I moved with my family to Ukraine and India as part of my dad's work. There, that completely shifted my worldview. While I was in both of those countries, I learned a lot about diabetes in those countries, since obviously that's a passion of mine. I got to talk to lots of people with diabetes in both countries and endocrinologists also. In Ukraine, it was very upsetting to me that lots of people thought diabetes was a curse because they had done something wrong in the past. They thought it was a sort of karma, which obviously that is not the case. And I had never really even considered that. I always knew that diabetes is a genetic condition with an environmental trigger. And to me, that's insane because you can't fully accept your condition and you can't continue to live a good life with it if you think that you have been cursed. So that was very surprising to me. And also in Ukraine, just there was no access to these technologies. Very few people, if any, were using closed loop systems and CGMs. Pretty much everyone was just on finger pricks and injections. In 2020, I moved to India. There, I learned even more since I met this fantastic doctor and clinic. They had so much support for their patients. They had these monthly clinics where they'd give food and insulin and training to people with diabetes. But in India, the condition with diabetes is very terrible because there's so much stigma surrounding diabetes. So you can get fired if your workplace finds out you have diabetes. You can get kicked out of school. People will not want to date or marry you if you have diabetes. And that's something that I never even considered. For me, I feel like having diabetes is kind of an advantage, if anything, in the workplace because I have personal experience with it. So that was such a foreign concept to me. Obviously, if people can't tell others that they have diabetes, they need to hide it. And in hiding it, they often don't treat themselves. So at work, obviously, you need to check your blood sugar, give yourself insulin, but because they're trying to not get fired, people just don't take care of themselves properly. They have super out of range blood sugars, terrible A1Cs, and glycemic outcomes, which lead to crazy complications. And so that was really hard for me to see because where I'm from, the stigma just doesn't really exist. I mean, people say things every once in a while like, oh, you have diabetes? Like, why did that happen? Or you can't eat that. But in India, it's just such a different game. So coming back to the United States, I really had such a new perspective. And I was so grateful that I live in the place that I do and also have access to these technologies and the support system that I do. When I came back to the United States, I started to look more closely at issues of accessibility, and I realized that they are also here in the US, but I just been sheltered from them because I live in such a privileged part of the country and state. Lots of people in the United States cannot afford insulin because insulin in the United States, you have to pay for it. It's not just provided to you by the government. Lots of people cannot afford insulin, so they will ration insulin or they will drive to Canada to get more affordable insulin. The United States is a place where you need to be able to pay for everything. Unless you have enough money just in your pockets to pay for health insurance, to pay for a CGM, to pay for an insulin pump, you will not have access to them. My family luckily does have access to them, but so many people don't. So I'm very passionate about how we can help improve access to these technologies by virtue of lowering the cost, and also in other countries learning about how I can best support people in those countries to learn more about what diabetes is so we can help decrease the stigma.
That's interesting. And seeing how diabetes is perceived in each country and how people living with diabetes are being affected in each country is so important to see the overall diabetes landscape. Because if you live in an environment, no matter the country, but you have your problem solved, you think that everyone lives that way and there are no issues that need to be solved. So it's so crucial to have a connection in the diabetes community. And that is really what advocacy does in the field of diabetes. And I know that you have been active in advocacy. I think you have been also part of the dedoc community. And I would like you to express what advocacy means to you and why you started being active in the field of diabetes advocacy.
Absolutely. So I was accepted to be a dedoc voice a few years ago. For those of you that don't know, a dedoc voice, it's an opportunity, it's a scholarship to go to these academic conferences around the world and learn about diabetes from a medical or more technical research point of view. And it's also an opportunity for these patients to educate these more technical medical people about what the everyday experience of living with diabetes and being in the diabetes community is like. So it's super fun for me because I feel like I get both sides a little bit. I get to go to all these sessions and learn lots about all the new up and coming advances in research. And then I get to talk to these clinicians, doctors, and researchers and tell them like, hey, this is what's important. This is what's the main issue in the diabetes community. It's super fun to visit all these new places, get to talk to everyone with diabetes from lots of different places around the world, and also to go to these conferences and meet new people. So highly recommend applying. So that's been very fun for me. Obviously, going there, I get to advocate for more diabetes funding. I mean, everyone's kind of already on my side because they work in diabetes, and diabetes is generally just kind of underfunded. Everyone's kind of on the same page there, but advocacy is very important, and I've been a part of several advocacy campaigns in the United States. I've been volunteering with this organization called Breakthrough T1D for a while. They're the biggest type 1 diabetes organization in the United States and probably in the world. And their main goal is to advance diabetes research. But in order to advance diabetes research, you need the funding to do so. So every couple of years, Breakthrough T1D will request some advocates that are children and also adults to go to Washington, D.C., our capital, and talk to Congresspeople about why diabetes research funding is important. Obviously, it's very important because without that money for research, we will not make any advances. And also, without more funding, all of the progress that we have made in the past will just completely be canceled because lots of these programs are multi-year. And if we don't continue to fund them over long periods of time, all of the progress that they have made over the last many years will no longer be helpful. So that's very critical, especially now in the United States, that we have some ideas about healthcare that are not super beneficial to the diabetes community. So I've been advocating for more diabetes research funding with Congress and also advocating for more insulin affordability. As I was speaking about earlier, insulin is not just provided to everyone in the United States by the government, and people need to pay for it. So we need to install price caps on insulin because there are only like a couple of insulin companies in the United States. And because there's not as much competition in the space, they are free to just raise the prices as much as they want to. And they have been doing that. They've been making insulin vials cost hundreds of dollars when it is not that expensive. It should be just a couple of dollars. Obviously, people with diabetes need insulin to live, and so they will pay for it. But we're trying to advocate to Congress to cap the price of insulin so that people don't continue to die from insulin inaccessibility, especially when it doesn't need to be that expensive. So that's a little bit about my advocacy journey, and I'm sure I'll talk about this a little bit later, but I recently was selected to be an International Diabetes Federation Young Leader in Diabetes representing the United States. All of us have different advocacy projects in our home countries where we get to advocate for whatever it is we find important in the diabetes space. I've just started on that journey. The program started in April, I think that was. So we have a 2-year term where we get to execute our advocacy project. Hopefully in 2 years, maybe I'll get invited back and get to tell you all about the cool progress I've made.
You'll surely be invited to discuss about your very own project. First of all, I would like to highlight the importance of the dedoc community because it's a project that introduced the presence of people living with diabetes in medical conferences, and having this open dialogue between healthcare professionals and patients is the only way to break the barrier between the ones who are interested academically in the field and the ones who profit from the academic progress in the field. So it's very important for people to go and attend those conferences and see how important it is to be active as a patient and how this role shouldn't be underestimated. They are the first people that profit from those conferences, and they should be heard and they should be there. Coming to the second part of the answer, seeing that how advocacy works and how step by step you build something and you approach a stakeholder or an organization in order to achieve something is so important. And I always say that even if you don't reach a level of policy change, which is the ultimate goal of advocacy, only the process is victory. Only building a plan in order to achieve something in diabetes advocacy is a success, because either way your voice is being heard and someone is more aware of what people with diabetes are going through. And thank you for being active. I think it's so crucial in your country where inequalities are so vivid.
Absolutely. And I just have a couple things to add. I have been fortunate enough to be able to advocate on these large stages and scales, but you don't need to do that in order to make an impact. I've written so many letters to my members of Congress about why diabetes research funding is important and why insulin affordability is important. So you can do that too. They already have lots of templates, so you don't even need to write anything and you can just hit submit. So if you live in the United States, I highly recommend that you check out resources provided by Breakthrough T1D and by the American Diabetes Association, because they often have really easy ways for you to, just with a couple of clicks, let your members of Congress know your priorities. And obviously, because they represent you, they will try to advocate for what you find important. So that's something you can do in the United States. I'm not as familiar with the advocacy process in other countries, but that is one great thing you can do. There are different ideas about if this is considered advocacy or not, but just talking with people about diabetes. And you can talk to people that do have diabetes or don't. And just education is such a valuable thing. So I can talk to people with diabetes and we can bond. And it's super fun to just have other people with diabetes in my community and be able to complain about random things. It's really helpful to see that other people with diabetes are thriving in life, which is part of why the Young Leaders in Diabetes program is so fun, just because you get to be around so many other people with diabetes. If you're with friends that don't have diabetes, you can help educate them about what life with diabetes is on a day-to-day level. People are often curious about what changing an insulin pump looks like, for example, or what different blood sugar levels mean. And so people are mostly just curious. I don't think that most places are actively hateful. I think they're just incorrect. And so one of the best ways to combat that is through education. So letting them know that you can do pretty much everything you want to, even though you have diabetes. It's just going to take a few extra steps. In doing so, that's more of a bond in terms of friendship. And also, if your blood sugar does go too low or too high and you need help, they will probably be more likely to be able to help you.
For me, an advocacy journey might start with an Instagram post or with a message to someone who is active on social media or with an email. Even to run a marathon, you just need to take the first step, and then there are some kilometers that are followed by that first step, but everything starts pretty small, pretty simple ways. And often people believe that in order to achieve advocacy, you need to do something big to create something great, but it's just a journey, and you start small and then you find your way and your voice in the advocacy community, which in the diabetes field, I can say that globally is quite open and ready to accept people in projects and in the advocacy field. Coming on to the next question is pretty much the experience we both have in the International Diabetes Federation Congress in Bangkok, Thailand. We both attended as young leaders in diabetes. I was representing Greece, you were representing the US. It was an educational program where we got the training we needed and the information we needed in order to understand in a deeper way what advocacy is and how to start with our advocacy journey a bit more skilled and a bit more aware of what globally advocacy is. I would like you to share your experience and how you felt leaving Thailand. How were those days for you?
They were fantastic. I absolutely loved every single minute I was over there. It was so much fun to meet so many people with diabetes from around the world. That is such a fantastic opportunity. I highly encourage everyone listening to this podcast who is in the right age range to apply.
In 2 years'
So
time.
yeah,
It's
in
every
2 years'
2 year
time.
time.
Yes.
Yeah.
I really just had a blast. It's fantastic to learn from people from around the world. I got to travel to Ukraine and India and learn about what diabetes is like in those countries, but I got to learn about what diabetes is like in like 60 other countries, which is so difficult to do by yourself. So I highly encourage you to apply to the program where you can meet incredible people making huge impacts from all around the world. And also, it's just super fun to hang out with other people with diabetes. You can talk about, oh my gosh, my blood sugar is this number, and they'll understand. We can talk about, oh, life with diabetes, and they'll get you. The social part was so much fun. And also just the sessions, I really appreciated those. We got to learn from experts in diabetes from around the world and really be prepared for our advocacy projects. So we had so many sessions on how to write effective email, how to navigate these diabetes databases from around the world, about the World Health Organization and diabetes in that context. Just so many great leaders that we got connected to, including the president of IDF. We had like a whole hour-long session with him where he was talking about his priorities with IDF for his term, and then we got to give suggestions. I mean, how crazy is that? That I'm literally, at the time, I was 20 years old, and I was getting to talk and give recommendations to the president of the whole International Diabetes Federation. So, and really get to have my voice heard. He really took the time to understand me. So I really appreciate the current president of IDF, Dr. Peter Schwartz. He's fantastic. Yeah, but I could rave about this program for a super long time. I feel like I'm very much prepared to execute my 2-year advocacy project, and I hope that you felt that too, and that everyone else at the program did. And also, being in Bangkok, every 2 years the program is in a different location. That was so much fun. I mean, I'd never been to Thailand before, so I got to do all the things. I got to eat mango sticky rice and pad thai, get a Thai massage, walk around. I got to see so many cool sights. So highly recommend the program, and I miss everyone already. And hopefully I can come back to the graduation in 2 years, which is in Doha. That'd be so much fun.
Yeah, I think you've covered pretty much all my thoughts. For me, the success of this training hit me in the plane back to Europe, where everything just sat down in my head and I get to process what happened during those 5 really intense days, because we were really sleep deprived, but we were just so energetic. And yeah, that's the thing that made me quite emotional, is that you see, Kona, so many years living with diabetes, and you have gained so much through those programs. You're now returning from Thailand to your regular life, where diabetes took you to Thailand. Diabetes is a kick in the ass in the daily life, but look what has been offered to you due to diabetes. And yeah, that was like those feelings that just hit me when I was returning to Europe were so intense. I'm so lucky that I was part of it, despite my work schedule and everything that is going on in my regular life. Yeah, I enjoy it so much, and I hope that I will be able to attend the graduation in 2 years' time as a reunion with the old YLDs.
Hopefully we can hang out there.
Yeah, that's a pinky promise. From what we have discussed and what you have shared, you have many things going on in your life. And I think that you're being prepared in many ways to fully educate yourself and approach diabetes holistically. And I would like to ask you what your thoughts or your dreams about the person you want to become with all the projects and the education that you're getting now.
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. And I feel like we don't ask that of ourselves enough. So this is honestly a difficult question, but I would like to, yeah, like you're saying, I would like to understand diabetes from a full, complete perspective. I feel like lots of people have bits and pieces of the different diabetes experience. Like some people are endocrinologists, some people live with diabetes. And I'm trying to understand diabetes from as many different perspectives as I can, so that I can be more effective in advocacy, in engineering, clinical research, all the different fields I'm interested in. So I think that's very important to me. In the future, I am also hoping that I can just be more educated about diabetes on a world scale and on a global scale and from different academic contexts. Also, just expanding my sense of empathy. I think that I've done a pretty good job at being empathetic towards different countries and different people with diabetes in different circumstances, but I feel like there's always more that I can do to improve that. And I can do that by educating myself more. So those are some of the things that I'm going to try and prioritize for my future. I'd say those are the 2 most important things I'd like to prioritize.
I wish you all the luck. I feel that you are in the right path. I see that you like what you do and that you are really active in what you do. And I think that the podcast and what you're doing now is just the beginning. And I really hope to see what you have achieved in a few years or a few months' time. Before closing the session, I would like to ask you if you have some projects to share or something that you need to inform us about you.
Yeah, so my project with the International Diabetes Federation as my YLD project, as you might have picked up on, expanding access to diabetes technologies in the United States. So I'm trying to figure out how can we get access to insulin pumps, CGMs, closed loop systems. So I'm having kind of a 2-pronged approach to that. The first one is talking to patients and doing a survey of how much would you be willing to pay for this technology. By gathering that information, hopefully we can make an effective argument to the companies that, hey, you would actually make more money if you lowered the costs. I've yet to see if that's true or not, but that's what I'm hoping to achieve. The second area is to target insurance companies, since in the United States, many people have healthcare insurance that will pay for some of the costs of insulin pumps and CGMs and insulin also. I'm hoping that I can do some literature reviews on just research that has been published about how these technologies reduce complications and therefore reduce hospital costs. And by showing that we can reduce hospital costs, that is making a good economic case to these insurance companies, showing that, like, hey, it's actually more cost effective for you to invest in this preventative care in the form of CGMs and insulin pumps rather than just paying when people end up in the hospital because they don't have access to these technologies and tools. So that's going to be my project for IDF. Hopefully it can be a really great learning experience for me, and also hopefully I can pressure some of these companies into making these technologies more accessible to people. That's the main project that I'm working on. Obviously, I'm working on getting my degrees. That's a pretty big project.
As I always say, prevention is always cheaper than treatment. Just as a detail, you have to give the money in advance, and that's why nobody wants to be active in the prevention. I think that whenever someone has a plan about what they're willing to do, success is the only way. But also I think throughout the process, the person that you will become by trying to achieve your goal is more valuable than achieving your actual goal. And I truly believe that, because you will learn so many things by building this project and by facing the challenges that you need to face in order to achieve your goal. It was a true pleasure having you here. Due to the time zone difference, we had to reschedule this call so many times.
Yes.
Throughout the past
Sorry about
weeks.
that.
It's the most challenging podcast I've had throughout the years. Yeah, in order
Oh, wow. I'm
to
so sorry.
schedule. No. That's a prize you won.
Oh my gosh, yay, I win a prize.
Yeah, it was a true pleasure having you here. I'm sure that we will reconnect in any way in a project or in a conference as a reunion. I wish the best of luck to your project. Thank you for being here.
Of course. Thank you so much for inviting me and for dealing with all the time zone difficulties and also for having such great questions. I really appreciate this opportunity, and you are doing fantastic work, and I'm excited to see what you're going to do in the future.
Thank you
And
so
what you're
much.
already doing. I mean, geez, like you're already a doctor and helping patients. Like
Trying
that's
to.
crazy impressive. So I appreciate everything that you do, and I'm sure that your patients do and your diabetes community does as well.
Thank you so much, Jay.